double down on our efforts to catch up with science and technology innovation. And innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
The problem being that, while we have our PhDs here, there aren't enough of us. And everywhere else in the world, for research to be successful, you need a complete research group.
It's very important that PASA members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that the Filipinos can have to do science with their PASA counterparts.
I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country.
The role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people.
Hello, good evening to the members in the Philippines, and good morning from our friends in USA, and of course from around the world. Good day to everyone. Now, I think this is the 5th day of a week of pro-science activism, finding common ground for building a robust post-COVID STI ecosystem in the Philippines. It's a mouthful of title we have for this one. So for today, I'm your moderator. I'm Glenn Gregorio. I'm a PAASI member and a co-chair of the REC4, that is the Plants, Agriculture, and Farming. I'm also a professor of the Institute of Crop Science of the College of Arts, College of Agriculture and Food Science of UPLB. At the same time, a member of the National Academy of Science and Technology of the Philippines. And currently, I'm the Center Director and CEO of Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture. So that is CIRCA. And maybe it will be an interest of some also that I'm also the chair of the technical panel for agriculture. So again, good day to everyone. We have actually a very lively discussion in the last 4 days. So I just have a short recap of the day 3 and day 4. Actually, in the day 3, we have seen that the Philippine state universities and colleges, and of course the higher education institutions, have created many research and development centers, and including the support offices. But we have seen it also that it's not enough compared to our growing needs and problems that we are having now compared, and as we compare ourselves also to our neighboring countries, especially Southeast Asia and beyond. So we are underperforming based on that discussion in terms of expenditure, in terms of creating patents and publications, and even commercializations or applications of our research to the society. We have a lot of challenges. It was mentioned in general, we have limited infrastructures and equipments, human STI capital, of course, the human resources. We have specific problems on procurement processes, the COA procedures, and other related processes related to capacity to spend what we have. And also, of course, we have to strengthen the academe, industry, government interconnectivity. Of course, this is where we have to see that the academe are the source of the innovation, and industry as the user, and the government as the enabler. So in short, we have to, I could summarize it with the 3C. We need to communicate, we need to compete, a friendly competition with each other, different universities. At the same time, we have to collaborate. So again, it's cooperate, compete, and collaborate and communicate. So in the day 4, we could see yesterday we have the speakers. They are really passionate, and we are talking about momentum building starting from our DOST secretary and undersecretary. And we have the momentum building challenge of scaling these efforts that we have started and making them sustainable. So that's the challenge we are. So we could see here, as we discussed also, there are some observations that still we are working on silos. We are still working by each or a different discipline, and we have to break the walls and we have to have a united efforts towards development through science and technology. So back again to triple C: communicate, compete, and collaborate. So we have seen how the initiatives of DOST has trickled down to the SUCs and HAI, like what happened with our speaker from the president of MMSU and the president of the Visayas State University in Leyte. So Pananaw 2050 was science and technology, was presented to us by Willie Padolina. And this is the foresight where actually Dr. Padolina emphasized the provisioning role of science and technology. And of course, this is where the academe and industry connectivity is really emphasized. So Gobet also emphasized that mentoring in research and leadership is very important. We have to discuss also, it was discussed also, or the emphasis on mentoring and going to the province, going to the region. We are talking about Mandana's ruling, and mentorship is really very important. We have to, as PAASI member, as the, I may say, the older or the, we should be the mentor for the next generation. We have to multiply ourselves. That's the challenge there. We have to, they say in Africa, if an old man die, it's the whole library is burned down. So we should not do that one. We should, before we pass, we have to pass to the next generation our knowledge and make cause them to improve more than what we have. So again, the message there is we have to be relevant and visible as we talk to our policymakers, and we should be showing to them that we are not just crazy for research, hindi tayo baliw sa research only, but we are really relevant and visible in this time. Again, that's the summary. Now we have a new set of discussant, resource person. I'm happy that I know at least more than half of them. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the moderator for this. And our discussants are really coming from the NGOs or the users of technology and educators. So I will introduce first our speakers, but what we'll be doing is the first three speakers will be our discussant will share their ideas. That's 7 minutes. Then we will have question and answer. Then after that, 15 minutes, then we have another set of discussant, the last two, which is Al and Richard, will be giving their piece, and we will have another discussion, and all of them will be there. So again, just a reminder for those who wants to share your ideas after that one, you have to make it keep it sweet and simple. So you should make it brief and targeted. So again, I just want to introduce our discussant. So can you show the first slide of our discussant? The first discussant is Baste Quinones. Of course, we hail from during our elementary years in Mindanao, in Bukidnon. We met each other there for a short moment, but of course we are not batchmate. So Baste is the chairman and lead of corporate foundation and executive director of the Pilipinas Shell Foundation. So he is coming from the industry. And our next discussion, I may say she is Rina Lopez Bautista. So Rina is the president and executive director of the Knowledge Channel Foundation Incorporated. So we have Rina here. So our next discussant is Arturo Tahop. So Oro is an associate for Community Resilience Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities. So they will be the first three discussant for this one. And next, I have to call them, introduce the second two. We have this Al Serafica, the very known Al Serafica. He's the board chairman and acting executive director, Center for Integrated STEM Foundation, which I'm also one of the director there, and a member of the national, corresponding member of the National Academy of Science and Technology. And of course, we have here Richard Abendan, the chief of party of RTI International, or this is the USAID STRIDE program. And I want to introduce also our scribe here. We have Lulu Herold, and at the end part, we have our rapporteur, the ever popular Joel Cuello. Okay, so let's start now. Again, I have to emphasize this is I have a timer here, 6 minutes, 7 minutes. I'll warn you, and we have a high-tech apps here. Once you are above 7 minutes, someone will pitch you virtually. So now let's go to Baste. I'll give the virtual floor to Baste.
Okay, thank you very much, Glenn and all. I wonder if you can hear me well, just to check.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So I was able to go to my diba, I mentioned a while yesterday that I was probably be off site, but it just so happened that the place where we were having an event tonight was just beside the Shell offices here in Alabang. So I'm back in my old office in Shell Philippines Exploration at the boardroom to be able to do this event. Okay, so thank you so much again for you all. I'm here, I'm wearing 3 hats in for this evening. The first hat is the fact that I do come from the corporate foundation space at this point in time. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of indication on how this corporate foundation are spending the money, the various areas we're spending. And of course, how much we are spending on education. The second part is an application of what I have experience on STEM, being the former managing director of Shell Philippines Exploration and the operator of the Malampaya joint venture. So I'd like to show to the people what it was really meant in terms of industry and trying to do the STEM part. But then it goes to the segue to the third hat, which is going to bring forward the proposal on how to bring SNT as a national activity using a very successful model of collaboration or coordination, which is Philippines EITI. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? Slide movers. I requested them to do it. Yeah, so that I'm going to show you the 2021 LCF, so League of Cooperative Foundations CSR Mapping Survey. Next slide, please. So as you can see, these are the types of areas where the corporate foundations are putting their emphasis on. SDG, of course, is Sustainable Development Goals. And as you can see, and even if I go back a few years with regards to the ranking in when we were doing the CSR, survey, by the way, this is 86 of 97 respondents. So there's 97 members in the League of Corporate Foundations at the moment. So this is quite a lot of good, rich data. And as you can see, quality education has always been the top ranking part. But what do we mean by quality education? What part of quality of education are we aiming for? And you'd notice when we drill down, you can notice that it's a broad spectrum. There is, of course, the STEM element along this particular part, but there's also the elements of high school education, elementary, and all the way to the part. So it's a bit broad. And so this is an area where I believe that we can work with other groups in trying to determine exactly how we can focus, the efforts and money that have been coming in terms of STEM education. Okay, so next slide, please. Also, if you look at it from another lens, so aside from the Sustainable Development Goals, we are also aligned in trying to see where we are versus the Philippine Development Plan goals. And as you can see here, the areas where the corporate foundations are really putting a lot of emphasis are the parts about, of course, vulnerability of individuals and families. Necessarily, a lot of programs are there, but not necessarily all the big spends. Yeah. So you would notice that human capital development is priority number 4 for the NGOs. So a lot of it is basically a lot of emphasis on ensuring that we can reduce poverty and improve economic activity. And at the same time, of course, the environment. And then beyond that, then comes the human capital development. Okay. So if you now go to the next slide, it just goes to just a graphical presentation of what you've seen before for those who haven't seen the program alignment of the Philippine development plans. As you can see, there are many other programs that that we are aiming to achieve so that we can get a matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. So next slide, please. What is the spend? So this is the money. As you can see, for 2020, over 5.5 billion pesos was spent in all of our programs. And as you can see, it's a little bit small, but about 1 billion Yeah, it's in education. So you can see this slice here that is here. This is a little bit of a how do you call it? It's an outlier. This blue slice used to be a lot bigger, but of course last year was COVID, and so the health and disaster response part sort of ballooned as compared to the education part. But previously it was mainly education. So as you can see, there's a lot of effort that is being put here. There's a lot of money that is being put there. But how can we then, focus that money into an improvement in STEM? And this is where we're working with Al, Serapika, and the others, in STEM and in the STEM Alliance Philippines, and trying to get more of the NGOs to align ourselves and tweak the program so that we can go more and more into the STEM type of activities, whether it is being done at the high school level all the way up to uni. Okay, so next slide, please. Now, this is where I'd like to say about extractive industries and where STEM really comes in. Okay, next slide, please. This is the Malampaya joint venture project. So Malampaya Deepwater Gas to Power project. So this is what took up 5 years of my life. And as you can see, the amounts of money that were poured into it, the total amount at the start, $4.5 billion to put this up, was really the biggest PPP in the Philippines before. And at this particular point in time, it's still producing. Of course, it's in the news about all sorts of stuff, but it's still producing. Next slide, please. We then went to Malampaya phase 2 and 3, which was another $1 billion. And the one on the left is the depletion compression platform at Subic. So we actually were able to make an offshore platform here in the Philippines. You can see the wells here. This is at 850 meters below sea level. And we put in 2 new wells at the cost of $250 million. So all of this was done with a huge amount of Filipino input. And in fact, the design of the depletion compression platform was done in the Philippines. So a huge number of engineers were able now to get experience on how to build offshore platforms. Next slide, please. And of course, at this particular point in time, we have given already to government $13 billion. And this is where I'd like to really propose that we can use some of this money from the extractive industries to power STEM. And that little thing there that you see with my, I'm carrying, Philippines won the Asset of the Year in 2015. I got that prize from the CEO of Royal Dutch Shell. So as you can see, the Filipinos can also really do it. And by the time that I left Malampaya, we only had 2 expatriates in Malampaya, and they were not in the, one was in the operations manager, and the other one was in finance. Okay, next slide, please. So the last part, where can we use a model to be able to coordinate properly? And my proposal is to use the experience of Philippines EITI. Philippines EITI is a group of NGOs, the government, and civil society. And we were able to make an opportunity to collaborate and really make things very transparent in the extractive industries, and to also then pursue many ways in sustainable development. Next slide, please. That multi-stakeholder group is something that I believe we can do for S&T in the Philippines. Instead of we can add on, instead of civil society, maybe the academe, or even keep civil society and have 4 of us there to be able to coordinate across all the other areas. The next slide, please. This is the amount of money that comes from extractive industries. So you can see that if even we tap just a little bit of this, we can also fund a lot of the STEM programs. So having a multi-sectoral working group, getting funding from extractive industries can be done. Yeah, and if it's not from the extractive industries, maybe even from other areas where there are funds that are available coming from industry to the government. Next slide, please. My last slide. So my recommendations. Number 1, have the NGOs really get together to have better coordination on STEM. It's very important that we do that. And I'm very glad that the STEM Alliance Philippines, where we are also a founding member, is now into that. My second recommendation is using extractive industries, government share, and the existing coordinating processes as an example for STEM. We can create a very coherent group to be able to have a long-term roadmap that can be made, and that enables focus and priority. Use part of the government share, obviously, for the funding part, and finally ensure that using that money is being allocated by endowment, so that's managed by the group, so that we can ensure sustainability. Let it be managed by industry, not by the government, so that we can ensure that there's sustainability going forward. Okay, so that's my 7 minutes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Basday, for that very enlightening and new thing for us. The message there really is we have to group ourselves. We have to be united and fetch the fund somewhere, not only from the CHED or the OST. We have the Department of Energy, or from the industry, the Green Fund, we have the Energy Fund. So there's a lot of money in the oil. So we have to use our creativity to extract them. Again, thank you, Baste, and just wait there for our discussion after Rina and Oro after their presentation. Now I want to call Rina to give your piece.
Thank you so much for inviting me to guest in your event, a week of pro-science activism. To everyone, a pleasant day to all of us. Science and technology is, as we all know, the game changer for a country to thrive in the fourth and definitely in the fifth industrial revolution. So I'm happy that PASA is taking action for change to happen in science and technology in the Philippines. Why do we need change? As we all know, pre-COVID-19, the Philippines was already a laggard in international benchmarking tests in science, math, and reading. Whether the test takers were the 9-year-olds who took TIMSS or the 15-year-olds who took PISA, thus the need to change. After 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, gaps have widened between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots. And I talk not just about individuals, but about countries as well. In the Philippines, after 2 years of no face-to-face classes and ineffective remote learning, our children, especially those from the public schools and the smaller, less resourced private schools, are now much more at a disadvantage than children from other schools and other countries who had more success with their remote learning and who opened up their schools earlier. It's a complicated and difficult problem, but not an impossible one to solve and to act upon. And what do we need to change? There have been many suggestions over the past few days on what to change. I believe that they are all good. As I mentioned earlier, it's a complicated problem which requires many solutions. But there's one that I would like to put forward, which in itself is complicated with a lot of moving parts, but also I believe a critical element. CP and Gisela hit the nail on the head when they said in their paper, PASA recommendations on science and technology, human capital development, that there is a clear case for strengthening basic education nationwide, which feeds our tertiary institutions, besides the need to redress high poverty incidence and inequality across the regions. Science tells us that brains are built and not born. And so I say that to truly affect the change in science and technology in the Philippines, we need to start from when children are very young. For children to learn early language literacy, numeracy, values, executive function, self-regulation, we need to support them with the materials with which to learn from and to support their teachers and caregivers with the knowledge, skills, and the values with which to teach and help them to navigate this world. Equipping, preparing, and guiding their caregivers and teachers to encourage their curiosity, support their explorations and experimentations. Today, Knowledge Channel Foundation is prioritizing 2 key stages: primary grade learning, which is the kinder to grade 3 or the 5 to 8-year-olds, and early childhood development, or ECD, with the 0 to 4-year-olds. Since 2018, we embarked on a 5-year program called Basa Bilang, which is the development of hundreds of video lessons in early language, literacy, and numeracy for grades 1 to 3. This, I believe, are the foundations to learn science and other subjects. We launched Wikaharian, our Filipino language literacy for grade 1, piloting in Santa Rosa, Laguna. We've also recently launched Ready, Set, Read, our English series for grade 1, piloting in Marikina Public Schools. We've coupled these videos with teacher training and mentoring. The pilot study results have been promising. It showed that Wikaharian videos, when coupled with effective teacher training and mentoring, significantly improved the learning not only of average students, but also of at-risk readers, of those who have high chances of failing academically. We patted ourselves on the back, thinking that we were addressing the problem at the lowest level and most foundational skills, only to be brought face to face with facts that proved there was still a lower level. Early childhood is when the most massive and unimaginable development happens in the brain, and when it is most sensitive to the environment. Neuroscience has told us that 90% of brain development happens before the age of 5. And the enriching or adverse experiences of a child during this time affect his or her foundations in lifelong health, learning, and behavior, with long-term consequences in schooling, diseases, productivity, and earnings. 1 out of every 3 Filipino children under 5 years old is stunted. Our country ranks 9 out of 80 countries with the largest number of stunted children. And yet, more than 50% of 3 to 4-year-olds do not attend preschool. And for those in preschool, only 1 out of 4 are served by accredited daycare workers. And yet, various studies have shown that even just 1 year of quality preschool makes a big difference in the trajectory of their life. And also in the learning and the implementation of science and technology as well. And so, as it takes a village to raise a child, the capacities of parents, caregivers, teachers, family members who share in their responsibility and care for young children are essential. This is the reason we are now putting a lot of effort in ECD, in video content, and in training the people who are involved in the care of children in their early years. This, I believe, affects the learning of science and technology as well. We've developed 10 video lessons featuring early childhood care and development concepts for children 3 to 4 years old, parents and other caregivers of children aged 0 to 4 years old. Video lessons are important tools in ECD as it allows children and adults to continue learning even with the pandemic and other calamities. Since 2020, we have trained close to 1,000 barangay child development workers and teachers, parents, and barangay health workers, and nutrition scholars in various parts of the country. This training builds the capacity of caregivers and teachers. It's only 3 days, but even after the training is over, we continue to monitor the progress of the caregivers and teachers and provide guidance through various media and technology, including Facebook groups that we've created with them. Those who participated in the trainings have found it extremely helpful and have been inspired to embrace their roles and excel in what they do to deliver the best early childhood care to the children in their daycare centers. We hope that this will really translate to better developed children, ready for life in the VUCA world, and to take on the science and technology needed by our country. We have a third priority. Together with various groups within the Lopez Group and other partners like PASA and System, we developed a program called Agham para sa Pagbabago. Focuses on science education and communication skills, with initial emphasis on grade 3, when science learning formally begins, and grade 7, when students begin exploring career pathways. We're piloting in Lobo, Batangas, and through this project, we are doing the following: revisiting the science curriculum, guide, and lesson plans with 21st century skills and competencies, with a strong focus on climate change, adaptation, marine and terrestrial biodiversity and protection, agriculture, technology, health, and communication. We've also provided learning materials in the form of video lessons and games that we developed together with partners like technology, the University of the Philippines, trained science educators on content knowledge, teaching approaches, and communication skills to make learning science meaningful and engaging for the children. The goal is for the kids to love science and develop a science mind of critical thinking skills and problem-solving abilities, and the communication skills to solve their own problems, fostering innovation. And we hope to encourage those that have the interest and aptitude to go into the STEM track. There's really so much to do. For our part, we believe that starting children young is key. I truly wish us all well and that pro-science activism creates a change we want to see very soon. The pandemic has taught us that only through working together, through collaboration, can we conquer the challenges of today and tomorrow. Let's learn from this experience and act together, act fast, and act now for our young Filipino children in our beloved country. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay kayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Rina, for that new piece of information for most of us. As you mentioned, we have to start early or else it's really irreversible. So even we have to start even when the child is still in the womb. And it takes a community to educate a child. That's very important. So we just don't give it to the teachers for them to learn, but it should be from the parents to the community, to the barangay at all levels. So thank you very much. Now let's proceed to our third discussion before we have our open forum. May I call now Oro Tahok for your piece. Oro, the floor is yours.
Yes, good day. I'm Arturo Tahop, Associate for Community Resilience under the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, or ICSC. I'm working in Eastern Visayas, partnering with what we call Laylayan communities. Small, isolated islands, upland communities, advancing local urban resilience, renewable energy, and climate resilience. Is it possible to share my screen? Okay. Excuse, am I sharing my screen or is it JB?
It's probably JV.
Yes.
Your ano po, presentation.
Yes, no. I'll share my, it's possible that I share my screen. Okay. Okay, thank you. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes,
so
yes.
There are three things that you have to remember, no? To know what ICSC does: climate, energy, and innovation. And these three things, these three pillars are converging in our program in Tacloban City, which we call Recharge Pilipinas, right? It's a 9.75 kilowatt hybrid PV system, started Posh-Yolanda, and the home of the Solar Scholars, the Tech Packs, and other RE solutions for communities, the home for planning for climate resilience for local governments, and even accelerating the just energy transition in the region by really pushing for the adoption of hybrid solar, diesel, and even wind in small islands. So let me present first the framework, right? In ICS Recharge Pilipinas, we have these three wares. The first is the hardware. It's actually the technology, right? In our case, these are the RE systems, the solar generators, home systems. Our rule here is the technology should be acceptable to the community, available. In our case, what's the available RE resource in the community, and most of all, affordable. And this And this system should be, and the community should be the front and center of the design and application process. And the next is the software. This is actually where science and technology comes in. It's important for us to train locals, farmers, fisher folks, women, youths, to really understand the knowledge of how to operate a PB system and other RE systems, as well as the skill sets so that they can really run, maintain the system. And the most important part is the orgware. This is the project structure, the organization and management comprising the roles of stakeholders, which sets the rules of the game of the project cycle. So therefore, for NGOs like us, science and technology research and innovation falls on software. Okay. Now let me anchor my presentation on the latest IPCC report released last Monday. Catherine Hayhoe, a climate scientist, calls it, "Our house is on fire." Now, let me just quote quickly what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, how the UN Secretary General responded to the report. No, he said that, "I've seen many scientific reports in my time, but nothing like this. Today's IPCC report is an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failed climate leadership," and so on and so forth. But the last point says that the facts are undeniable. This abdication of leadership is criminal. Then what then is the role of science, technology, research, and innovation in addressing the climate change perspective? The climate crisis. So I lined up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recommendations. No? First is climate science to sound policy. It's really important for us working in the field that the science, the evidence of the climate impacts on the ground should be used as guide by policymakers, LGUs, communities to develop and roll out sound policy. An example is this, right? After Yolanda, most of the researches are centered on storm surges, the impacts of strong typhoons. But what we really need right now is local scientific research on slow onset events, slow burn climate impacts like this, research in Giwan and Cebu. By using this as a guide, we projected the sea level rise in Suluan Island, Off-Grid Island in Giwan, and proposed this climate adaptation interventions. As you can see, the sea will swallow the settlements and the critical communities by 2050. So there's really a need to develop a Suluan safe settlement adaptation strategy. Second point is to popularize ST platform to educate farmers, fishers, and upland settlers, urban poor, coastal communities on the long-term effects of the climate crisis and ecosystems, human populations, livelihoods, and development. One good initiative is undertaken by Rice Watch Action Network. It's called the climate risk field schools, right? Where they teach people, farmers, climate resilient crops. And another type of this initiative is put forward by Dr. Lorna David and the UP Marine Science Institute. This is the shared community approach, the best way, no? Combining structural and natural mitigation to address the problem of sea level rise and coastal erosion. And next is we really need to build a generation from childhood to youth that is prepared through science education to take on the task of climate change and its effects. I believe that Knowledge Channel is also doing this right now because one of your workers, Edric Alma, is from Morong Rizal, right? And last one is accelerating the just energy transition in the Philippines to science and technology research for niche products and services. If we want to accelerate the just energy transitions, we have a lot of work, in doing research and developing innovations in terms of microgrids, in terms of resiliency of power systems, no, and even solid assessment of the energy needs of target communities. And one last point is this, BOCTEC for renewables. I live in Rizal. In Rizal right now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 target floating solar. And there's a wind farm in Pililla and a proposed wind farm in Talim Island and even Mount Sembrano. Question, where will we get the technicians to run the systems? What TESDA is doing right now is not sufficient. We believe that in order to build a robust solar energy, renewable energy industry, we need technicians and engineers that have the right knowledge and skills to make the just transition possible. So that's it. I have 20 seconds left. So all of this recommendation is geared toward achieving a climate resilient development pathway. Maraming pong salamat.
Thank you very much, Oro, for that very comprehensive. It's very inspiring to see a science-based solution, nature-based solutions. You put them together, the engagement of the youth to make the software, which is the key to work, and how you have really remind us that it should be technology like this, should be acceptable, available, and affordable. And really, it's really nice to see how you intertwine climate, energy, and innovation to make it. You need innovation using those different energies around you. Thank you very much. Now I want to see the 3 discussants here. They are here with us. And now it's time for anyone from the audience, PASI members, and other participants to give your ideas and ask questions from our resource persons, because it's very rare to get these very precious people around us. We have 15 minutes to do it. Okay, I could see the first hand from Dr. Abincola.
Yeah, Glenn, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for all our discussants, panelists. I really learned a lot of the importance and initiatives to bring both the NGOs, government, and of course private sector together. So I'm very interested with what Baste proposed and is working on in the convergence of using revenue, the ecosystem of the extraction industries in the Philippines, which of course includes oil, mining, gas. And my question to Baste, and good to see you, Baste, joining us here. What would be in your opinion, the easiest way or the fastest way to align the STEM education priorities to those industries to justify the return of what revenues can be allocated as a percentage to education? I mean, one thing is to meet the immediate needs of these industries, which is more on engineering. But in the long term, there's of course a need for more basic science training. But anyway, I'd like to hear your suggestions or further details on this.
Well, the first part obviously is trying to get a good working group, to ensure that there's the roadmap to be able to make this happen. And again, as I mentioned, the EITI roadmap is a working model. At the start, I was the oil and gas representative when Philippines EITI was developed, and civil society and government were the other 2 people, aside of course from the whole mining group. And there was a lot of mistrust at the start. There was a lot of, the convergence on goals on trying to what we needed to do was not there. But we're now on, I think the around 6th or 7th year now in terms of doing a country report, and that's the working model. You get the people together, they learn how to trust each other, they learn how to develop plans going forward, and then with that, the priorities are therefore better outlined, and then you can then use, then that's the time when government can then put in processes and procedures to where the money can also be spent.
I think this is great that you brought this fact to PAASE, because funding has always been a problem or challenge. You have to defend the budget, everything. But if you tie it with an industry with a well-known ROI and a long-term prospect for growing or taking care of the industry, that's a well-defined need that can solve many things, from employment, future employment, to bringing technology in-house. So I think, Baste, it's really worth pursuing this and creating a serious white paper with input from PAASE on how this revenue tied to education and R&D can only make this vital industries grow and strong. Yeah, I'd like to pursue that with you and PAASE if we can.
Sure, that's really great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I want to call President Mario for your comment.
Yes, I have a question. Wait, I have an echo.
It's okay.
Okay. So I have a question for Rina and maybe Urok and also Pichin. Yes, so I believe that an empowerment program should have a developmental component, right? And so therefore, your programs in the provinces or maybe in the poorest communities involve families, those who may be more concerned with food, with economic concerns. How do you convince, the parents and the communities that science is something that they really have to also pay attention to?
I believe that they do know that it's something that's important to do, and to encourage with their kids. And so it's really showing them and giving them the tools that they need to do it. No, if it takes too much, because it's difficult. No, but then if you provide it to them and make it a little bit easier for them, like providing like the video lessons, or providing the training that the teachers need or that they need, the caregivers and the parents that they need, then it makes it easier for them as well. No, of course, in the beginning it's hard because there's a change in mindset. So they have a lot of myths also, or wrong notions, or they're stereotypical. But it's something that we need to keep at also, and not stop, with just talking to them once or twice, so it's a continuous process. Yeah.
Okay, Mario. Okay, I'd like to pitch in. First, you really have to explain things based on their situation. Imagine explaining the climate crisis to a fisher folk, to a farmer, to a lola, right? Using the hockey stick and all the charts. I remember one story when I was doing that approach. One elderly asked, "Sir, what's that? Is that 2D echo?" The hockey stick, right? So, malabo talaga. So you speak to them in their language and you explain the climate crisis based on their needs and dreams. The issue of food security, the issue of availability of water, the issue of livelihoods, which will be threatened when tuna suddenly ships away from the eastern seaboard and goes to the Central Pacific. The issue of explaining to them that since 1986, 10 to 15 meters of the coastline has already been eaten by rising sea. And during a storm surge, all the people living along the high-risk areas near the coast will be washed away, including their bangkas. And it's also talking to them that hope should be based on collective action, but not only based on collective action, but evidence-based science. Yan po yung kailangan sabihin sa mga planners, kahit sa barangay. They should not rely on the cut and paste approach of development planning, but use the researches by academic institutions, by NGOs, to guide them in developing climate risk a solid climate risk assessment, local climate change adaptation plans, and actually the whole development plan. So addressing the climate crisis is actually a developmental issue, kaunlaran, kinabukasan. Ganun po dapat ang approach. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we have to go down and explain to them, because as I mentioned, a lot of people are saying, why are you crazy with science? Wow, masyadong tayong baliw sa science without any application. Once you touch their soft points or their pains, you will see now how they will be interested in science. Any other comments or questions?
If I may, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, I've got thank you all. Your points are excellent, all three of you. I've got a quick question for each one of you, but let me ask first the questions, then you could take your turn to answer it. So the first one is for Sebastian. Sebastian, you mentioned that you talked about the extractive industry. Could you tell us how much of the total energy supply for the Philippines is accounted for by the Philippine extractive industry, and how much of that is considered renewable? And if you could clarify the $13 billion share of the Philippine government, is that investment share or is that revenue share? Rina, thank you for your commendable program with the primary grade learning program, as well as the early childhood program. What geographical reach in the Philippines do you have in terms of your channel? If you could clarify that. And finally, with Arturo, I really appreciated your your initiative to accelerate the just energy transition of the Philippines. I really like that phraseology. But with your recommendation about accelerating the science and technology platform to educate farmers, fishers, and other stakeholders in regards to the change in climate, that's an extension program in reality. And are you collaborating with any state universities or colleges in Eastern Visayas or around the country to actually accomplish that? Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with the question from Baste, then Rina, then Oro. Go ahead.
Okay. The $13 billion is the government share from Malampaya. So that has been already provided to the government over the past 20 years.
Oh, so that's revenue to the government.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So how they use it, unfortunately, that's where we have actually been really trying to get them to go into more on S&T. But we have no influence on that. Okay. Now, with regards to the energy, so Philippines is a very small, in terms of the electric power, it's only 13 gigawatt in terms of the consumption on a daily basis, and that's the generating capacity, about 13 gigawatt, and we're wanting to go all the way to 40 by 2040. Yeah, we're a very, very long way from that. 60% of that is coal. Yeah, so it's quite a dirty industry still. 20% comes from Malampaya, and it's everybody knows depleting. So we really need.
Did you say 20% from Malampaya?
Yes, from that just one asset. So
is that natural gas?
It's natural gas.
Okay.
So what we really need to do is find another Malampaya or bring in LNG. And of course, go really hot on renewable energies, solar, wind, and whatever. But those are intermittent. Those are VRE, variable renewable energy. That's where we need batteries, etc., and all that to be able to make up for the duck curve and those things. It's a very technical solution that will be needed, where a large amount of very bright engineers and scientists are needed to make happen.
Right. Baste, Joel, if I can interject, Chairman Glenn.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm actually with Oak Ridge National Laboratory now here in the US, and I can see where the priorities are. And to make a point, and Baste probably emphasized this earlier, the Philippines has one of the most expensive electricities anywhere in Asia. And also the gas and oil is a challenge. I think you're feeling it right now from the pump. Without going geopolitical about this, we miss a big window here when we had the ability back then to drill, to explore many gas fields, oil fields within the West Philippine Sea. But in reality, this is a problem that's not going to go away. But that 13 billion that Baste mentioned, it's a real money that is not being used properly. You see, at the University of Texas, and most of those University of Texas that are overlapping and growing very fast, their revenue back in the 60s was tied to the oil and gas industry in the US, especially the state of Texas. So that's a percentage of the oil and gas revenue by the state goes to the University of Texas. It's a very interesting model, because if you think of a revenue that will come and go, but is constant in terms of needs, and the return on investment that we can do to take care of that industry and perhaps shield the Philippines from future geopolitical problems. The energy industry, from gas to coal to renewable energy, is something that is worth taking care of and focusing in terms of R&D and STEM development. So I'm really, really interested with what Baste brought. And if Joel, if we can find a good white paper within PAASE to make this a very strong position with well quantified numbers that Baste can help us, I think it will be a good one.
Thank you very much. Now, quickly, can we ask Arina to answer, and also Oro, before we proceed to the next panelist? Arina.
Thank you so much for that question. Our video lessons are actually on air, on TV, online, and offline. So on air, we're on Sky Cable and about 400 other cable operator partners. We're on Signal, Satellite, GSAT, A to Z, and now Beam as well. Online, we have our website, YouTube channel, I Want TV, and Facebook, and Facebook Live. We have programs also there, and Kumu. And offline, we provide our video lessons on portable media libraries, which are like hard drives and USBs as well, for those that cannot access the videos on air or online. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quickly, Oro, can you answer the question?
Yes, we partner with the State University, the Engineering Department of the Eastern Visayas State University, EBSU. We have student interns who go into our facility and help us innovate, incubate, mad solutions, RE solutions for the community, right? Out of the box solutions. And this, when proven successful by piloting and testing a stereotype, we share it with solar ates, solar lolas, solar nanays, ordinary people on the ground who help us also develop it through a continuous process of feedback and iteration. At the heart of this is human-centered design. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Oro, and thank you very much to our first batch of discussants. Just stay there. Maybe you still have questions at the second part of this discussion. So our next discussant, quickly, I'll have to call them now. We have the two last discussants with us. We have the ever passionate Al Serafica to give us his piece. Al, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Glenn, my co-partner in a system. Today, I'll be discussing, I think, can you share my slide? I sent my slide to you. Yeah, probably click on the top part. I'll be discussing pretty much what we were been talking for the whole week about the aspirations of having a R1 research university and a working science and technology ecosystem. And of course, at the end of my talk, I'll talk a little bit about system and how NGOs like System and Knowledge Channel and Filipina Shell and the legal corporate foundations can help us in what we're trying to achieve here. And I always want to take it on a personal level. So I'll tell you a story. Can you put on the next slide? I'll start a story about a young grade school student who participated in a national quiz bee in 1978. A year later, he went to Philippine Science. 10 years forward, he finished his bachelor's in chemical engineering, placed on the board, and became an employee in Johnson & Johnson, making more than his dad made at that time as his first job. But opportunity came. He was offered a full scholarship to go to a university in New York, an R1 university. Fast forward for another 6 years, he finished his PhD and started a company. A year later, he received an SBIR grant and attracted his first $1 million venture capital, leading to more than $25 million put into the company over the life of the business. Fast forward again, 30 years later, since 78, in 2008, he sold the first part of his business, the wound dressing artificial, to a European company. 4 years later, he sold his second business after he got FDA approval for an implantable device. Next slide, please. So at 45, I retired and raced cars for a living and watched my children grow. That's my story, guys. So this is where I'm coming from. This is what I'm looking forward to. So next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of a flavor, what does it take to be in an R1 university? We're all still aspiring in the United States and in the Philippines. But in the US, it works already. I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's an R1 university. There's about 6,000 students. Half of them are graduate students. And in my department alone, I think we pull in about 15 to 20 million. And I was assigned in a very up-and-coming technology in 1989 on membrane technology, where most of the things that I do are actually related to developments coming from companies. I remember my first project was to visit a company in Germany, Shot Glass, the one that makes your vials. And my work was to create a membrane made out of glass, a hollow fiber membrane. And during that time, I finished my master's and I had 6 conferences in my belt and even attended a Gordon Research Conference in New Hampshire, where I roomed with a potential Nobel Prize winner. They also have a very tight collaborations with industry that I was able to get a internship job in Boston in 1993 between my master's and my PhD. I was paid $50,000 as an intern. This is in 93, guys. That's the kind of ecosystem when you have a good university industry partnership. They offered me a job afterwards, but I said, no, thank you. I need to finish my PhD. So I did. I went back after having some experience in biopolymer productions in a W. Air Grace facility in Maryland. I was doing 5,000 liter E. coli and yeast culture production for my filtration system. And that got me interested to take my PhD in the upstream part of biotechnology, which is producing biopolymers. So that's what I did my PhD on. And focusing on an R1 university really entails both the academic part as well as the industrial part, at least in engineering. I know in science it's a little bit less on an applied sense, but I think that's what we need here. Next slide, please. So for the next 16 years, I became an entrepreneur. I founded Silos in '96. Again, I mentioned SBIR during the earlier discussions with Beda on Monday. The company went on to live for about 16 years, and we had 7 FDA-approved products, which is used in Europe and in the US. I had venture capitalists both in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. So I would visit all of the continents for my board meetings, which is kind of exhausting actually. And then I received also 10 US granted patents and about 20, more than 20, I think the last count I did was 20 international patents. And we sold the 2 businesses because of being a venture capital back, we need to return the capital to the investors. We sold the 2 business units in 2008 and 2012. And that was my detail. So now what? I asked myself at 45 and 32, what am I going to do next? I can start another company and continue, or I can dream again. So the next slide, please. I had a new Philippine dream, which is I'm living it for the last 8 years. I decided to come back to the Philippines and help create an enabling science and technology ecosystem that helped me in the United States to do what I did and be able to accomplish what I was able to do. So here I became a balik scientist. I helped US Aid Stride, who was up and coming at that time. And I was also a consultant for UP, LaSalle, and Pecari with Doc Willie in 2013. I became PAASI president in 2017, when I tried to converge academe, industry, and university together. And just recently in 2020, after being elected to the National Academy in 2020, I also was asked to join the board of system. And now I'm acting executive director because Cheryl Monterola, which is also a PAASI member now, has been asked to serve as NISMED in UP. So I have to stabilize the boat in system until we find a good executive director moving forward. But just to give you a flavor of what that last 8 years has been, living this so-called Philippine dream. Next slide, please. So as balik scientists, as you know, we go to the different areas and institutes of DOST. I help MSU IIT, besides my 2 consults, a public university at UP system together with Giselle, and of course with Raymond and De La Salle. I try to help MSU IIT in Iligan. I was also on the ERDT board as a private sector representative, where we actually visited Israel to look for agricultural technologies that can be brought back to the Philippines for graduate masters and PhDs. Of course, recently, I think we did our first cohort of ICOR training with Fisher and LaSalle in 2018, together with US Aid Stride, which Richard hopefully will talk about. I also did a Hirang tech transfer recently with Forest Products Research and Development Institute in Los Baños. And I'm still a member of the ASEAN Diagnostic Hub, where we tried to bring in some of the early COVID kits in April 2020. And I'm still doing that for PCHRD, together with A-STAR in Singapore and representative countries in Indonesia, where we tried to actually use a Philippine kit of Raul, the one who did the COVID kit, to be used also in Indonesia in 2019, but only be overtaken by events that he shifted his research and development for products in the COVID space. Next slide, please. For tech transfer, I've been doing tech transfer for the last 8 years. Again, been mentoring startups in UP as well as all the technologies in all the UP campuses for the last 8 years. So I see most of their technology. Next slide, please. In Stride, I think Richard's going to go detail, but one thing I wanted to highlight that was mentioned earlier is the university faculty internships with Richard and I started in 2015. We also did the Government University Industry Roundtable, which is really a good effort to converge all industries. We tried in 2016, but it's still a difficult time at that point because of the transition. I think might be worth trying again, as I mentioned to PAEP, President Pascual. We've also been working on procurement. As you have heard everyone complaining about it since 2014. And it's a never-ending story, but it's worth an effort trying to solve. We've also recently, besides the $500 million grants that we provided in Stride 1 and Stride 2, we continued some of those grants to help them to get to the path of commercialization. And of course, the high course. Last slide, please. I think this is my last slide, the next one. So for STEM, actually STEM is really a foundation of spin-off Unilab Foundation. And it has very strong international advisory board with MIT, World Bank, Japan, and ASEAN. And I've acted since September. And next slide, please. And most of the things that it does is really on upgrading K-12 STEM teaching. Now we have a grant with UNICEF for about 10 million and DepEd. We have also curriculum development with TESDA and ILO for about 3 million. And STEM innovation programs in Sorsogon and Rizal together with Mario. And also, we're doing some out-of-school youth alternative learning systems with Caritas Philippines and Father Tito Kaluwag. And also creating modules for industries, which is what we're doing for DAO. And the last item is the National STEM Bee that I think CP discussed earlier in the program. I think I have my last slide, please. So what can you do? What can a foundation, NGOs do? I'm in the technology commercialization space. I believe that science is only good when it's utilized and creates impact. But it's a very difficult. Again, chances are very slim for a technology or research to become a product and sustainable and become a company. So we have to look at it as a relay race, actually, wherein what Jeff describes as NICERS yesterday, they do the initial research to test the concept under government funding and academia research. But then you pass it on to startups and spin-offs. Usually, this is where I think the first point of contact for NGOs, maybe Baste, we can use your proposed funding on funding startups and spin-offs. There's a avenue right now with the Philippine Innovation Act and the Innovation Startup Act. You can talk to Mon Lopez or the succeeding DTI secretary to do this. But then we really need private sector to help in the manufacturing spaces, where I have asked IMI, Ionics, Fastech to be involved in the RX box early on in my work in UP in 2016. And finally, of course, if you want a home run, this is what Joel and I have been aspiring for, is to have global companies here doing R&D, creating real research and products that have global reach and distribution. And that's practically suntok sa buwanan, but it's worth going for. So this is my last slide, guys. So I challenge us together in now my new family in the League of Corporate Foundations and Private Sector that I've always been, together with PBED, with Rina, and my father-in-law. I really want to ask your help to help the ecosystem. And again, thank you everyone for listening, and thanks to my family and my whole technical family for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Al. You are really inspire us. This is actually an actual experience and an example of R1 University product that really inspired the young people like me. Actually, it's made me redream again, because I started my company just 2 years ago. But I hope it's not too late, so that I'll buy my first course too. Thank you very much for that. Now let's go to the younger generation, not so younger generation, but more inspiration again. We have called now the ever popular Richard Abendan. Richard.
Thank you for that kind introduction. And so first, to all the fellow PASE members here and my fellow speakers and guests, Stride consultants, Al Serafica, and I see Dr. Menchi here. Good evening and good morning. So I'll try to keep this, as upon the advice, short and sweet, maybe short, but may not necessarily be sweet. I'm showing my slides. Doc Glenn, am I showing it? Just to confirm, do you see my slides? Okay. So again, thanks for the invite to talk about on this RTD on the HCD paper on the R1 universities. And I think you already, many of the people here in PASE already know about the Stride program, but by way of an introduction, and let me just go to full screen. The Stride program, Science, Technology, Research, and Innovation for Development. Hold on, let me just fix the Zoom. It's a USAID funded $38 million project to, in one sentence, to strengthen the science, technology, and innovation capacity towards economic growth in the Philippines. We've been around since 2013. We're ending this year. And we have many projects and activities. I'm not going to go to many of them at all for this for tonight. But I just want to show two pictures here. We're working closely with Philippine government, and I think you had speakers already from USEC Gev and USEC FITA this week. And so many of the things that they're working on is something we've been working with them for the past few years. And also the STRIDE program has an MOU with PAASE. So we have many joint programs. So that's the STRIDE program, and I'm not going to go much into it as just more of an introduction to myself and to the project. But also, I actually work for RTI International. Many of the folks in the US know about them. They are based in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. We're an independent nonprofit research institute dedicated to improving the human condition. And RTI is really, first and foremost, a scientific research institute way back when. And it's actually born out of industry-academe partnership, something that Dr. Glenn just talked about the whole theme going on this week. And it was actually born out of a local government in North Carolina, working with the R1 universities then, even now, UNC, Duke, and NC State, and working with an anchor company, IBM, to create this dynamic ecosystem behind the backdrop of a tobacco, cotton-based industry. Now there's a lot of large industries there, and so research industries and innovative companies. I was actually a baby of the RTP ecosystem. I actually worked for 5 years in GlaxoSmithKline as a research scientist. So anyways, just an introduction of what we do in the STRIDE program. In a way, this sort of sets the flavor we're doing in STRIDE in the past 8-9 years. I was asked to comment about the HCD paper and the paper of Joel, and the HCD paper cited STRIDE, so I pretty much know a lot of the components there. And Joel, I love your paper here on the R1 universities. I've borrowed your image here. I'd like to tackle the two sides of this graphic, the building R1 universities and the incentivizing for global tech companies to do R&D here. So let me go to the first one. And this really talks about, I just sort of screen grab images here from the papers, talking about how can we create a framework for these universities to become R1 universities in the Philippines, right? And the HCD paper talks about the SUCs, how can we do, how do we get more faculty engaged in research and all that. So I just want to sort of mention in 3 slides, the STRIDE program is working with PASUC, and I believe Dr. Tears was also a guest this week. And we've been working with them for the past few years. And it's really about innovation diagnostics. We work with them, and Dr. C.P. David was actually one of the authors of this study. It's a self-diagnostic work where we got all the members of PASUC, all 100+ SUCs, to pretty much self-diagnose themselves on different pillars on innovation. And in a way, this helps sort of that framework that maybe Joe was thinking of how do we go towards R1 university. So it's also doing metrics that are just not the typical metrics on SUC leveling, CHED centers of excellence, but this is a sort of give a flavor about the work we're doing there. And you can see a little radar plot there of the work on how universities sort of judge themselves based on these different criteria. So the results again show you here the different parameters. We feel ultimately it's a way that universities can challenge themselves and say, okay, I want to be an innovative university. What does that really mean? What do I have to build my capacity on? What do I have to work on? Where do I need help? And so there's sort of a way as a roadmap for them to identify their journey towards this R1 university. And this, again, something in partnership with PASUC. We already have the results. It's sort of going to be given, it's given to the individual participants on a private basis. But I think going forward, you can see here some of the results. And ultimately, I just want to sort of bring this final point here that on average, like 44% have an average score. So it's not that great, right? And it's understandable. And so I have some bullet points of things you can think about. How, we talk about policies for innovation. How do we make them really more adaptable to our HEIs? It's easy to say, let's be innovative, let's do more extension, let's do dedicated researchers and less teaching for some faculty. It's easier said than done. And you talk to different universities that have different sort of hindrances. So we're working with HEI codes and how can we translate them to that. We're working actually with 2 pilot HEIs, SUCs in particular, to bring in these frameworks to make them real into their own HEI codes. Maybe to look as a case study, like USTP has a charter that's totally dedicated to innovation. So that's something to look at. But at the same time, you have Doc Shirley was a guest here also this week. on MMSU, who does not need a change in the charter, but it's doing a lot of innovative work. And you have the private HEIs that you're also considering, like DLSU, and I know Dr. Beth is here with TIP. How do you balance the financial concerns here in terms of investing in R&D and innovation? So again, these are case studies you can look at, but there's definitely bright spots throughout the country. And what are the metrics and incentives for these HEIs to pursue these efforts? It's something it's easy to say, yes, I want to be an R1 university, but ultimately, what will drive them tomorrow to start doing this? Right? It's something you have to ask ourselves. And again, the context about CHED centers of excellence, SUC leveling, it all factors in here when we had this self-diagnostic effort going with the universities. So that's one half already, the R1 university discussion. Next is the topic on the industry engagement and getting the international R&D framework and industry companies working in the Philippines. So in the STRIDE program, and Al mentioned this, we've been giving grants for R&D. And probably towards the end of that grant program, 3-4 years ago, we actually started getting companies to actually co-fund the research, not just be a participant, actually add money to the project. So I'll show 2 examples where you have Del Monte working with UPL Los Baños. They actually matched our funding for investment for this project. You have IMI, a large Philippine-based, but still a multinational semiconductor company working with DLSU, again, co-funded the research in terms of resources. But there's a trend here, right? These are big companies, Del Monte, IMI, and you can see here, we actually developed industry-driven curriculum in the country, all 15 programs. I mentioned again, TIP, Dr. Beth is here, Cloud Swift, Emerson, these are not small companies. But again, this is more in curriculum development and human capital development. So you can see if they're incentivized, they see a value for this, they'll participate. They'll actually help drive curriculum. In some cases, actually, they co-teach these courses. Again, I just want to highlight these examples where there are ways we can try to bring in these large companies, but it's not easy. And I'm showing you a couple of examples, but they're not always going to be, there's not going to be a wholesale change. Again, with TIP's program, you see Western Digital as a partner there in their initiative. And also, since we have our guest here, our speaker from Shell, when we try to link companies, local MSMEs and innovation, I'm glad that we have private funders here, like the Shell Foundation here actually helped out in some of our programs in Northern Mindanao. So this is my second to the last slide. If you remember this picture, many of the people in this room and this function in this event now, I think some of them are in this picture. This was done with Makati Business Club. You see Al there, you see Joel, Raymond, Gobet's here too, I think. No, it's not. But anyways, so this is a discussion with the university talking about industry academic partnerships. Dr. Glenn, you're here, that's right. And so it's really a complex matter, and I know you've discussed this already, and I think it's just give my fine points about this. You really have to articulate the benefits for both sides, for industry to participate, and also for academia. There are no shortcuts. This is a multi-year effort. When we got those joint grant-funded programs with industry partners, it wasn't an overnight success. And HEIs had to deliver. I remember when Dr. Purugana was talking in this event, and Jazz is there, HEIs had to deliver, right? With NYU having, I think, more patents than the whole Philippines in 1 year. You really have to see where industries actually work with universities and why, right? And with Joel's work on the how we get foreign R&D networks into the country is something I think we always have to be discussing. So, the Philippine Innovation Act has been passed. There's an IRRs there. It talks about how we can make innovation help MSMEs and the marginalized. Maybe there are ways to this act we can sort of explore how to bring in those ideas that Joel had and the HCD paper. So again, just bring that all back in. I think this is a great approach. It's something that maybe all these numbers from 1 to 8, I hope it's not an all or nothing thing. We have to agree that there's some things we can tackle more easily than others. So my last slide as a question to others, maybe for the discussion now, I ask myself as a development organization, and multilateral agencies, what can we do to help realize the vision of the HCD and the R1 papers? Now, it could be where now the interventions that are not easily procured or implemented by government agencies or academics is something we can provide, right? And it's like the experts, the services, risky investments. And I know Joel discussed like maybe a bond towards innovation, right? Development bonds are not new, right? So we can challenge the NGOs or the multilateral agencies to pursue in the Philippines. Targeted on-demand quick capacity building or technical assistance in the STRIDE program. We do it since COVID started. So it's something we can, I think, if there's acute needs that we can fill in, that it takes time for government or academics to transition to, I think we can do there. And finally, working with existing contexts and systems. I know Dr. Francis mentioned this in the dialogue in the passive mailing group. Context is key. We really have to work with existing systems and working with government partners and existing academic partners. So I think that's it. And ultimately becoming providing objective assessments to our programs. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard, for those information that give us really encouragement to pursue. There's still a chance for us to be, we have just to be innovative enough to reach our goal. Again, I want to I want to thank the two discussants we have. We have Al and Richard. Now let's call all other discussant, and if you have some focus questions, especially for Al and Richard, we'll spend some time there. Then let's any other, you're so itchy in asking a question for the other three, you are welcome. So the floor is now open for comments. I'm looking for raised hands here.
I think Gladys asked a question, but
okay,
Gladys, you can ask the question in person. I saw your chat.
Yes, hi Al. I have this question. I think you already read it. So can you give a comment on what do you think Philippine universities need to do to encourage global companies to become partners in R&D, what your experience in RPI and WR Grace, or what Singapore universities are doing?
I visited A-Star and Biopolis also recently, about 2 years ago. And definitely looking back, I've been asked these questions actually with my venture capitalists in Europe and in the US in terms of what activities we do here. One thing that's unique is indeed our biodiversity play. But more important, besides the actual science research activities, the market, the paying customer, if for lack of a better word, is also a part of the consideration. So I think we can encourage them to come over, especially on some product lines that are very unique or common to us. I remember BST, bovine somatotropin, which is a growth hormone that was very popular in Japan to increase milk production. In the US, it's hardly used earlier, but they end up doing the bioproduction a lot and for a particular market set. So if we can identify technologies for production here, I've been talking to Joey Ochave, of course, at Unilab about how we can increase or accelerate, for that matter, this type of bioproduction facilities. But Al, you have to give me the market. You have to give me the paying customer. And of course, the profitability aspect of the investment rate of return. All the things that businessmen talk about, that they want the answers today, not 3 years from now. But nevertheless, it's a matter of developing the relationship and trust. I think together with the US PAASE members like Michael, we can lend our credentials like Gobet and our group in Maryland, which is 50 strong PAASE members there. Maybe collectively they can endorse particular companies to come over, but we need to receive them and localize them properly with the right incentives and not changing the rules in the middle of a game, which is one of the big distractors for foreign direct investments in the Philippines. So if you disrupt the regularity of laws and contracts, we cannot do that. So hopefully the next administration will be more trustworthy in that regards and be able to honor commitments that are done in both private and public. That way we, again, gain the confidence of the investing community, both here and abroad. I hope I answered a bit of that question.
Yeah, thank you, Al.
Thanks.
Do you want to add on that, Richard, or is that only for Al?
I can add quickly.
Yeah,
obviously, you have to deliver. You can imagine, Doc Gladys, I mean, if you're in the chemistry department, right? If Dow showed up and said, we're looking for novel synthesis reactions and all that, like, I mean, you have to respond quickly. And it's not, I understand, right? There's this whole load and bureaucracy, and How do you reposition your resources and all your faculty to do a certain big project with an industry? So I guess there has to be a mechanism in place. You have to have a long-term agreement and then say, okay, let's have this long-term vision. But it's you, in a way, you have to be able to maneuver and work at the pace of industry. Are we there yet? I'm not sure, right? I mean, we're not designed to be that nimble, unfortunately, and it's not your fault. It's just that that's the way it is. And so in the US, it's not always perfect, right? And in the industry academic partnerships, there are long-term multi-year programs. That's my only comment, but yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. I could see the hand of Joel.
Oh, yes, thank you, Glenn. So I've got quick questions again for our two discussants. Al, first to you. So yesterday we had a side comment in the discussion that there's a need to clone Alvin Kulaba because of the work that he's doing in terms of catalyzing government, industry, academic partnerships in Leyte, and that would be helpful for other provinces as well. But now it's clear to us that you need to be cloned as well. But my question to you is, it's quite curious really, because most of us who go to R1 universities, we end up going and pursuing an academic career. But you're one of the few exceptions. You went into entrepreneurship. And I'm sure that the environment in the R1 of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute had to do with that. But if you could address that, please, as to why you decided to go into entrepreneurship. What was it that motivated you, or what was it that really inspired you to get into that direction? Richard, thank you so much for addressing those two needs of, for developing R1 universities, as well as the industry engagement. I've never heard actually of the innovation diagnostics tools that you developed with USAID. And I think that's really a powerful tool for benchmarking. And with the results that you showed, like 44% were average, 52% low, and 4% high. I think that it would be very important for this diagnostics tool to be conducted, on a periodic basis. And if you could tell us whether you've been planning on doing that, and perhaps even updating the tool itself, and really to be able to narrow down the SUCs that are really intending to become Research One universities. So those are the two. If you could kindly comment, the two of you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Can I call Giselle first? Maybe you have related questions so that they could answer it in one time.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, my question to Richard is related to Joel's, and I like the self-diagnostics. But then this is over 100 SUCs, and sometimes the average does not really reflect the real scores, the real picture in the top SUCs in the regions of the country. So would you consider doing or sharing information on some of our top SUCs like MMSU or BAPSU, and let us know whether the scores are just the same or a little higher, because they might be really good candidates for R1 universities. Also, how about external diagnostics? Because we know very well that external assessment is so important. And so we do have international criteria for top universities with a very strong, very strong rating on research and applications to society. You have US, you have Times Higher Education. So that's my question to Richard.
Thank you, Giselle. Now, Al and Richard.
Al, you want to answer in order?
Yeah, I'll answer Joel, and then Richard can go on to answer Joel and Giselle's question. Joel, it was quite simple for me at that time. I was just a poor grad student, but if I get my degree, I'll earn $95,000 a year for a chemical engineering PhD, fresh grad. So I said, what's the worst that can happen? If the company fails, there's no consequence in the US if your company that you started fails, unlike here, like Willie Padulina was discussing yesterday, then I can always go get a job. But if it works, then I can retire at 40. I missed it by 5 years, but nevertheless, it was a good call in that. But it actually opened my eyes in terms of being able to see what our ecosystem in Rensselaer at that point. We have a yearly MIT Enterprise Forum similar, where we award the top entrepreneur graduates of the university. At that time was a Delphi company with a 10 billion business. I think one of the founders of NVIDIA donated a 350 million digital performing arts center in the university. So there are inspirations of the alumni that's filtering around there. Not much different to MIT, where you have Bob Langer of chemical engineering starting 100 companies in this group. So it actually is the ecosystem in that northeastern corridor that was very prevalent. Unlike the Silicon Valley, we're a little bit more in the deeper science, less on the ups and eps and ICT. We're more on the, I mean, actually the Moderna chairman right now, Nubar Afeyan, was my contemporary in the early 1990s, starting a company with Perceptive Biosystems. He was just coming out of Danny Wang's group in MIT. And I was reading a book of Silver in 1993 on high-tech entrepreneurship at that time. And that was my Bible before I started my company. But really, the odds were, if you were a gambling man, you would have done it the same thing that I did. So never too late for you. Never too late for you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Richard, do you?
Yeah, quick
want to
answer.
add?
So yeah, to Joel, the IDT has actually been done like a year and a half ago already. We have given the results to individual universities. It's not meant to be publicly shared because it's a self-diagnostic. We want them to be honest about their answers. To Giselle's point, yes, I mean, not all SUCs in the 100+ members of PASUC are in the innovation space per se in terms of science and technology, right? I mean, you have the normal universities there. So of course, it was like, all right, do this. At least you know where you are. If you not really have any long-term innovation ambitions, then sure, right? It's not really for you, but it was something that's done in terms of like, okay, where am I? What do I, if I want to be somewhere, what steps I have to take with this diagnostic? To also the point, it's actually based on some of the Times Higher Ed QS indicators. But again, it's not fully the same. It's not a full objective third-party sort of assessment. And also, I guess, to Joel's question about, is this going to be something that's worth updating? It's actually with PASUC right now, but we're thinking that we could actually give this tool to PACU, or maybe the private universities can also do it. Again, it's a self-diagnostic. If you're honest about it, it just gives you a roadmap, right, and a vision to go forward. But I think the big problem here is that if you have the results, you know the policy interventions, how do you do the implementation? That's always been the problem. If we can have HEI experience from the US universities help the Philippine universities in terms of the bureaucracy side of things, I think that's what's important, because it's easy to say I want to be innovative, but you have to put it into paper and into local code of the HEI.
Thank you. That's very good.
Both.
Thank you. I just want maybe a question from me to Al and maybe for Richard. Because as you know, in the Philippines, if you're in the academy, you're a professor, you want to go into a business, you're encouraged a little bit. But at the same time, it's also against the civil service rule, where if there's might be a conflict of interest, or what will be your advice? How would we do it in the Philippines? Because I know we are still, even in UP, if you start a business, as if you are a devil, or you are being not encouraged by. There's an encouragement, but the civil service law is not encouraging you to do that. So, what's your comment on that, and what would be the solution?
Wanna go first?
I'm gonna give a quick answer because I know this can be a long topic, but there is a way in UP. I know it's been done. Maybe Al knows the.
Yeah, actually, it can be done. I mean, you have Raul Destura now with 200 employees on MTech. He's our first spin-off in 2015 with under Giselle and Paep, and Luis Sison and I are part of the PTBDO. At that point, we blazed the path for him, and he was a determined entrepreneur, doctor, diagnostic, and I was trying to help him in the A-Star, AXD for Indonesia for about 100 million kits in 2018, 2019. Then COVID happened. Then he stepped up to the plate, developed a COVID kit. He's doing very well now. I think he's probably the first Philippine billionaire on science undertaking. I think it's the creation of the models, Glenn, that we need to be able to point to. Because I keep talking here for the last 6 years, and they always say that's in America, that's not applicable here. But now I can point to Raul, or I can point to Jude Sassing of OII with Dr. Gustillo, made the Axis implant. Those are good examples, and there are a host of smaller successes that we try to help in stride. Evelyn Taboada in Cebu, Mel Palencia, and I have a list of 10 that I've been watching for the last 5 years or 10 years, 8 years that I've been here. But
I'll give the opposite side of Al now and say, I won't talk about the being discouraged to do your own business, but in a way, my other statement is, for the researchers and faculty who don't want to be going to business, you don't have to, right? And we have a program where we're trying to encourage researchers to spin off their technology, work with an entrepreneurial partner. You know, you don't have to quit your day job and actually change your mindset. If you're not a business inclined person, you don't have to be, right? If you want to be in the lab, but there must be a mechanism for you to at least pass off your technology and at least profit from it, sure, right? But it doesn't have to be a wholesale mindset change.
Okay, so I have a quick question here from Giselle. So Al, what do you think are the top 3 impediments to a technopreneurial success in the Philippines? Some of those have been already answered. What are the top 3 problems or
there were some issues that we were talking about it yesterday, and just reiterate that we need entrepreneurs, technical startups fail 9 out of 10 times, and you cannot be black mark. And like in the US, you don't actually a badge of honor to how many times you fail. In the Philippines, it's not so. It's very difficult to close a business. I've been asked to run a business several times, but because of the likelihood that it might fail, I don't want it on my record, because closing a business in the Philippines, as Willie Padolina described, is not a trivial pursuit. That's one. So we need to rectify that. The carryover for doing long-term research, also, that the question that I asked for NOLCO yesterday with Willie, which is not part of the law, 10-145, needs to be addressed in terms of our ability to carry over our investments in research to be deducted in the income of the company in the future, or with a big investor company, say like an Ayala, to be able to carry those losses to their balance sheet if they're earning on another side of the business. So there are some structural financial capacity, but of course, for me, number 3 is investment capital. It's SBIRs, guys, across the board in all departments, education, transportation, energy. They all need investments to do research and product development in the small businesses that innovate. So SBIRs are very successful. And Richard mentioned ICOR, which we have brought here in the Philippines for the last 3 years. We've trained the trainers. We have trainers now for ICOR. And that is really a good program of NSF that created 1,000 startups and now raised close to $1 billion in those startups. So it's a good proven method. It's a learning, team training for scientists to work with entrepreneurs as well. So I think all of those are just possible pathways, but you need to kind of step up to the plate. As they say, Glenn, you can read all the books about farming, but if you don't dig dirt, you're not a farmer. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you add the 4th one, Richard? Or you're muted.
I'm on mute. Sorry.
Okay.
I gave the best nugget already. It was on mute. No, I think, again, to my earlier statement, I think our effort to sort of transform our scientists and researchers to become entrepreneurs is a bit, maybe there's too much pressure there. Let's try to make it more realistic and at least more doable. And again, I'm sure many examples of the US faculty who have done tech transfer and sort of spin-offs and licensing can give a better experience there. And you don't have to be a technopreneur overnight or be like Al.
Okay, thank you. I think Joel has a very important question that he could not maybe sleep if he could not ask this question to Baste. So Joel.
Thank you. It's a follow-up to Sebastian, but all discussants, please feel free to give your take. Sebastian, so the manufacturing sector in the Philippines, which of course is globally linked, has been very helpful to the Philippine economy. It contributes around 18% to 20% of the GDP. And in my talking recently with Yusek Rodolfo of Department of Trade and Industry and the Board of Investments, he told me that really the goal is to go up to 30% because it creates a lot of jobs, a lot of export. But it's been a challenge really pushing it up from about 20% to 30%. And he talks about this strategy that's a possibility, and that is to make the manufacturing industry in the Philippines as a green industry. So that it could attract more, clients, manufacturing companies, and to provide a competitive advantage to the Philippine manufacturing sector. Incidentally, President Biden of the United States gave his State of the Union address earlier this week, and he talked about bringing manufacturing back to the US. But of course, that would be advanced manufacturing, and he's talking about Intel setting up this huge modern facility somewhere in Illinois, but that's advanced manufacturing. So the Philippines really needs to act quickly to establish its competitive advantage so that it can attract more manufacturing in the Philippines. And again, one way to do that is to position it as a green manufacturing sector. So when we talk about green, we need energy sources that are green. So can you comment on that, please? The renewable energy capability of the Philippines, how much of that is supplied to the entire energy need of the Philippines, and how can that be increased? And what do you think is the projection for that?
Well, we did already an energy modeling analysis. This is the electric power sector with Tito Aliga and UP ERDFI. So we got some scientists to do using LEAP to determine what actually the generating capacities are needed going forward based on econometric analysis of industry, commercial, and residential. So obviously the industrial part is the most important one when you talk about the green part. We are a long way to go still. To be, again, getting weaned from 70% coal to something that really becomes green is a long journey. There is the Renewable Portfolio Standards Law, which requires a 1% increase of RE every year. But, it's going to take a while, Joel. So having a green industry here in the Philippines is just basically saying they like to put up solar and all those other stuff, but that doesn't work. It's variable RE is not the path going forward. You cannot do that. So the mix of technologies that are needed to be able to have a sustainable electric power industry are varied. And this is where we need some very good brain power, plus, of course, the ones who have the money and the risk that is there to be able to put in these big plants coming in. So we're hoping that with the work that we're doing, I'm also part of the Management Association of the Philippines Energy Committee. We are trying to work with the DOE in making a master plan going forward to be able to make sure that we have a more robust way of supporting industries going forward.
One quick follow-up. Is nuclear energy in the mix in terms of what's being considered?
Well, that's very recently the president has signed an executive order allowing nuclear to come in. But as you know, nuclear industry requires every support things behind it. We have zero support structures for nuclear in the country at the moment.
Thank you. If the other discussants have additional comments, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Joel, and thank you very much to all our discussants. I think it's getting late in the Philippines and you are being energized in US, so we are not that synchronized. So now let's proceed to the two main events. The one is the summary of the day and the summary of the whole for Joel. Then we'll have the closing remarks or vote of thanks from our president. Joel, are you ready?
Yes, right. I'm acting as the rapporteur for today, but I'm not going to give a detailed summary, but more like an overview, and I can deliver the detailed one in writing a bit later. But congratulations to all of our discussants. So first of all, you are the exemplary discussants or group of discussants, I believe, in this whole 5 days, because you kept to your time limit, which is really impressive. So we have Sebastian Quinones Jr., and he talked about, of course, the need for the extractive industry in the Philippines to be able to contribute to the development of the country, particularly in the field of science and technology. And he talked about the 13 billion US dollars that, for instance, that extractive industry, Manampalaya, is contributing to the government, and then perhaps PAASE should mobilize itself to talk to the government and make recommendations that a part of that be allocated for science and technology, which really reminds me of the defense industry globally, that when they do business with a particular country, they have an offset program, which means that the country that avails of this contract with global defense industry, they set aside a certain percentage of that revenue for development purposes. So that is a good model, I think, that could be adopted in the Philippines in the case of the extractive industry. And Reina Bautista talked about their commendable outreach educational program for early childhood as well as the primary education. And because of the pandemic and because of the displacement of the many school children in the Philippines from schools, I think that you have a very, very critical role to play after the pandemic to be able to get a lot of these kids back on track with their education. And Arturo Tahup talks about, of course, the Institute for Climate and Sustainability Center, which again is very, very important, particularly in regard to your extension program of having outreach with the farmers, the fisher folks, and other stakeholders on the countryside on how they could be educated so that they could become active stakeholders in promoting energy sustainability, among others. And now, of course, thank you so much for recounting your personal experience, which is inspirational, but really it provides us with a lot of insights into how future scientists and engineers in the Philippines could be and should be educated. That it's not only a science career, but they have to be linked to the industry, to the entire science and technology innovation ecosystem, so that they could really determine in what way or in which niche they could really make their maximum impact on. And Richard, as chief of party of the USAID STRIDE program in the Philippines, thank you for giving us again an overview of your more recent programs, particularly with the diagnostic tools for SUCs, so that they could benchmark where they're at in terms of their innovation capability or innovation readiness, and in terms of how they could perhaps a few of them or some of them could transition into and be transformed into an R1 or a Research 1 university, together with their industry engagement. I'm going to leave it at that. So we're going to have the video, and again, we're going to have a detailed written summary later on. Thank you, Glenn. Back to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joel, for that summary of the day. And we have some take-home messages there. Again, thank you, our discussant. Thank you for being with us all the time. We have here Baste Quinones, Reina Bautista, Oro Tahup, Al Serafica, and of course Richard Abendan. And now for vote of thanks and closing remarks, I call now our president, President Mario Santo Domingo. Mario?
Yes, thank you so much, Glenn. And I'd like to thank everyone who participated during the last 4 days and of course tonight. But first, I would like to thank those who worked the hardest, I think, but then are equally talented. Our technical staff of Richmond Pancho, JB Humacio, and Vince Chudosio, who is the backbone of this 5-day event. They were our webmasters, our Zoom masters. They did everything, the slides, beautiful. Of course, I'd like to thank also our student assistants from UPLB who did a lot of documentation, Angel Capili, Rinoa Castillo, Joe Henry Tenido, all our moderators. I won't be reading all the names. You know who you are. You are all very, very successful in facilitating our discussions. Our scribe and rapporteurs, our lone scribe is Lulu Harold with the help of the students. Thank you so much. Our main speakers, CP David, Giselle, Joel, your 2 papers have been the catalysts of these discussions. And of course, our discussions for day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5. You won't believe how serendipity played a major role in identifying a lot of our discussions. A friend of a sister, a compadre, a boss of a friend. So a lot of those. And Al mentioned family. We are indeed a family. We are a community, and we have to nurture this family and community. Now I was thinking how to summarize these discussions. And then I thought, oh, there's a tool. There is a tool. And that tool is, of course, a cloud. But then, of course, before that, I'd like to thank the tag team of Giselle, of myself, and Gladys. This won't happen without our previous or immediate past president, Giselle, and our incoming president, Gladys. We did a lot of heavy lifting and work toward the completion of these roundtable discussions. So now, with what I was talking about, I thought I'd use all the summaries of the discussions from days 1 to 4 and generate a cloud of words. And this is what I found. I wasn't really, I wasn't surprised, that research and innovation came out on top, And so I won't focus on them because, yes, all this is about research, all this is about innovation. But the third most frequently mentioned word is programs, and that was actually in the 10 themes that I actually developed even before doing the clouds. This is some kind of hypothesis testing that I did. I listed the themes that I thought were the most predominant during the past 4 nights and tonight, and I came up with these 10 themes. I remember Giselle saying that maybe we have to have a 10 action points. So I just thought, okay, let me generate 10 themes, based on what my readings of the summaries are and of listening to all the discussions. One is creating and supporting multi-stakeholder partnerships. Second is designing robust programs. We have to use design thinking in designing programs, even, for example, that includes scholarship programs, right? It's not enough that we give money to STEM scholars. We need to have some programs that would actually spur their engagement, their completion of degrees, even completion of STEM PhDs. I've heard about PhD students taking a lot of time writing their dissertations. Why not creating, for example, a dissertation house or something like that? Something that is being tried in other places. Emphasizing developmental approach. Thank you, Rina, for emphasizing this tonight. Promoting SCI in the regions, just like what Alvin has been doing. Advancing internationalization or globalization of S&T R&D. Advocating for evidence-based policies and programming. Improving science communication. This may be a figment of my imagination, but I thought that it's important that we emphasize science communication. Once I talked to Joel about himself getting involved in science communication because he's just a great communicator. Increasing or leveraging STEM funding, developing data infrastructure that will aid in designing programs and removing institutional barriers to R&D. So let me just stop there, and hopefully some of these 10 action points will form part of the white paper that will soon be written to summarize and be forwarded to current and future government officials, policy makers, and institutional leaders. And let me just end by again thanking everyone. Maraming salamat po. And let me read this wonderful quote from Francis Bacon. Things alter for the worse spontaneously if they be not altered for the better designedly. Maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat po at magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll end the Pro Science Week and more Pro Science Week next time. So again, thank you very much, everyone. God bless us all.
It's your pleasure.
Thanks, Rina. Thanks, Basta. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for
Good luck to all of us.
Take care.
Bye.
Can we have a picture?
Yeah, okay, we'll have a picture.
A picture.
You turn on your cameras and have your sweetest smile.
Salamat Baste, salamat Rina, Uro, salamat Al and Richard. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Mario, I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, yes. Rina is in the same time zone as I am right now. And congratulations, Rina.
Thank you so much.
Taking picture, is it Mon or Glenn?
Well, I took also Gladys, as I always do.
Oh, there it is.
Thank you,
I'll
Mon.
share with you.
Yes,
Hi,
Lisa,
Gisela.
thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello.
Thank you, Baste.
there.
Bye-bye.
Hi.
Bye for now.
Bye.
That's Richard.
Nice to meet all of
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Al, I have a question for you. Here, I wrote it. How do we improve our internet here in the Philippines?
I'll ask my neighbor. Si Dennis Uy.
Yeah, please.
Good word.
It's really a hurdle in the universities. It's a
Well, yeah, Gladys. Mario, it's really timely that you invited Baste.